The Dalai Lama XIV is the spiritual leader of Tibetan Buddhism, known for his wisdom, kindness, and commitment to non-violence. His life and teachings inspire millions of people around the world. In this video, we will dive into the wonderful world of His Holiness the Dalai Lama XIV to better understand his philosophy and how it can enrich our lives. But let's first figure out what the Dalai Lama means in general. The Dalai Lama is a spiritual lineage in Tibetan Buddhism that began in 1391 and represents the incarnation of the Bodhisattva of compassion, Avalokiteshvara. From the 17th century until 1959, the Dalai Lamas were the theocratic leaders of Tibet, ruling from Lhasa. Today, the Dalai Lama is revered as the spiritual leader of Tibetans, and he is given the title His Holiness. Despite popular belief, the Dalai Lama is not the formal head of the Gelugpa school, which is run by Ganden Tripa. The word Dalai in Mongolian means ocean, which symbolizes greatness, and Lama in Tibetan means teacher. After the death of the Dalai Lama, the search for his new incarnation begins, usually a child who undergoes special tests. This process can take several years, after which the found child is sent to Lhasa for training. The Dalai Lama and the Panchen Lama are linked by a teacher-student relationship, and the Dalai Lama is also considered the leader of Tibet. Tenzin Gyatso, known as the 14th Dalai Lama, humbly describes himself as an ordinary Buddhist monk. He is the spiritual mentor of the Tibetan people. On July 6, 1935, the future Dalai Lama was born into a peasant family in the small village of Toksa, located on a hill above a valley in the Tibetan region of Amdo, which is now part of the Chinese province of Qinghai. His parents, Choikyan Tsoring and Sonam Somo, later known as Diki Tsoring, along with 20 families of the village, including several Chinese families, were engaged in agriculture. Of the 10 children in the family, only he and one brother survived. He was given the name Lama Thondup, which means wish-fulfilling goddess in Tibetan. At the age of 2, a boy named Lama Dondup was recognized as the reincarnation of the 13th Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso. In the Tibetan tradition, the child's name is chosen without regard to his gender, which led to the future Dalai Lama receiving a name usually given to women. He treated it with irony. Lama was one of 16 children in his family, of whom only 7 survived. His older sister was named Tsaring Drolma. His brother, Thutun Jig Norbu, was recognized as the reincarnation of Toksa Rinpoche and later became the head of the famous Kumbum monastery. His other brother, Lobsang Samten, also devoted himself to monastic life. In his autobiography My Land and My People, the 14th Dalai Lama notes, "If I had been born into a rich aristocratic family, I would not have been able to penetrate the feelings and aspirations of the poorest Tibetans. But because of my simple background, I can understand them, anticipate their thoughts, and that's why I have so much compassion for them and have always tried to do everything to ease their lot." Believers in Tibetan Buddhism respect the Dalai Lama as a manifestation of Avalokiteshvara, also known as Chenresik, the Bodhisattva of mercy and protector of Tibet. A Bodhisattva is a being who turned his life towards achieving enlightenment, striving for spiritual awakening for the well-being of all beings, and promised to return to the world again and again to help. During his pilgrimage in 1909, the Dalai Lama Zai visited the village of Toksa and was fascinated by its beauty, expressing a desire to return there again. Years later, after his death in 1937, a group of lamas arrived in Toksa in search of his reincarnation. After a series of tests, including recognizing the predecessor's relics and toys, 2-year-old Lama Thondrub was declared his successor when he recognized them as his own. The 14th Dalai Lama expressed the opinion that not all reincarnations were true, but he considers himself the true heir of the Dalai Lama V, known as the Great Fifth, based on vivid dreams from his childhood related to the past life of this Dalai Lama. At the age of 6, His Holiness began his studies at the monastery. The educational program, based on the heritage of Nalanda University, included 10 subjects, 5 basic and 5 auxiliary. The main courses covered subjects such as logic, fine arts, Sanskrit and medicine, but special attention was paid to Buddhist philosophy. This subject included 5 aspects: Prajnaparamita, or the perfection of wisdom, Moja, the doctrine of the middle way, Vinaya, the rules of monastic life, Abhidharma, the study of metaphysics, and Pramana, dealing with logic and epistemology. Additional subjects ranged from poetry and drama to astrology, writing and synonymy. In his youth, the Dalai Lama met Heinrich Harrer, an Austrian mountaineer and writer who was a member of the National Socialist German Workers' Party and an SS officer. Harrer, who spent 7 years in Tibet after fleeing British India, shared his knowledge of the West with the 14-year-old Dalai Lama, which was unusual for Tibetans of that time. Modern Chinese propaganda uses these events as ostensibly proof of the Tibetan leadership's links to Nazism, although the Dalai Lama later claimed that in his youth he had no knowledge of Nazi ideology. In 1959, at the age of 23, His Holiness successfully passed the final exams in Lhasa at the Jokhang Temple as part of the Great Prayer Festival Monlam Chenmo. After successfully passing the exams, he was awarded the title of Geshe-la-Rinpoche, the highest academic degree in the field of Buddhist philosophy. In 1950, when the Chinese invasion of Tibet began, the Tibetan people asked His Holiness to lead the political administration of the country. 4 years later, he visited Beijing and held meetings with Mao Zedong, as well as other senior Chinese figures, including Deng Xiaoping and Zhou Enlai. In 1959, after Chinese troops brutally suppressed the uprising in Lhasa, His Holiness was forced to seek refuge outside Tibet, and since then he has been living in Dharamsala in northern India. During the initial period of exile, the Central Tibetan Administration, under the leadership of His Holiness, initiated a discussion of Tibetan issues at the United Nations. As a result, the General Assembly approved 3 resolutions concerning Tibet in 1959, 1961 and 1965. In 1963, His Holiness presented a draft democratic constitution for Tibet and consistently implemented reforms aimed at democratizing the administration of the Central Tibetan Administration. This document was called the Charter of Tibetans in Exile, which guaranteed the rights to freedom of speech, religion, assembly, movement, and choice of place of residence, as well as established a framework for the work of the Central Tibetan Administration in exile. In 1990, after the reforms carried out by His Holiness, the Tibetan administration in exile switched to a fully democratic track. The Tibetan cabinet previously appointed by His Holiness was dissolved, and Tibetans in exile elected a new parliament. In 1992, the Central Tibetan administration's plan for the adoption of a constitution for a future independent Tibet was published. According to this plan, a provisional government should be formed in liberated Tibet, the main task of which will be to convene a constitutional assembly to draft and approve a new democratic constitution. His Holiness expressed his conviction that in the future Tibet will be able to unite 3 historical regions, Yutsang, Amdo and Kham, and turn into a democratic federal state. In 2001, for the first time, Tibetans directly elected their political leader, Khalon Trip, who formed a cabinet. This ended the tradition in which the Dalai Lamas ruled Tibet through Gaiden Phodrang. In 2011, His Holiness retired from government, transferring his powers to the elected leadership. On September 21, 1987, His Holiness proposed in the US Congress a 5-point peace plan to resolve the crisis in Tibet, including making Tibet a zone of peace and ending Chinese resettlement policies that threaten the survival of Tibetans. The plan also called for respect for human rights and democratic freedoms, environmental protection and an end to China's use of Tibet for nuclear purposes, as well as negotiations on the future of Tibet. On June 15, 1988, His Holiness clarified that negotiations should lead to the creation of democratic self-government in the Tibetan provinces, according to the principles of the PRC, while maintaining Chinese control over the international and military policy of the region. The Dalai Lama, a recognized defender of peace, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1989 for his peace campaign on behalf of Tibet. He consistently advocates a non-violent approach, even in the face of cruelty, and became the first recipient of this award, noted for his contribution to the protection of nature. His Holiness visited over 67 countries on 6 continents and was awarded more than 150 awards, including honorary doctorates and prizes, for his contribution to the promotion of peace and non-violence, as well as for the development of interreligious dialogue and global responsibility. He is the author of more than 110 books. The Dalai Lama actively participates in dialogues with representatives of various religions and conferences aimed at strengthening interreligious harmony and understanding. Since the 80s, the Dalai Lama has been in dialogue with scientists in the fields of psychology, neuroscience and physics, which has led to important collaboration between Buddhists and renowned scientists to achieve peace of mind. The study of sciences was also introduced into the programs of Tibetan monastic universities in exile. The Dalai Lama expresses openness to innovative ideas. He approves of scientific research in the field of human cloning if it benefits individuals, but opposes the mass use of such methods. He also does not reject the possibility of the existence of mindfulness based on computer technology. In 1998, Christopher Hitchens mentioned that Shoko Asahara, the founder of the Aum Shinrikyo sect, gave the Dalai Lama XIV a significant sum of 45 million rupees or 140 million yen, or $1.2 million, which led to several high-level meetings. In 2010, the independent newspaper noted that the Dalai Lama felt remorse for supporting Aum Shinrikyo and its leader. In 2018, Andriy Terentyev, a Buddhologist and former personal translator of the Dalai Lama, commenting for the Rossiya Sugodnya agency, said that in the 90s the Dalai Lama received a large donation from Asahara to a Tibetan orphanage, for which he expressed gratitude. However, when it came to Asahara's spiritual achievements, the Dalai Lama stated that he did not know anything about them. Terentyev also clarified that the reason for his question was a leaflet Aum Shinrikyo, which had images of Asahara with the Dalai Lama and a photocopy of a letter of thanks, mistakenly mistaken for confirmation of spiritual merits. According to Terentyev, the Aum Shinrikyo creed was a mixture of various religious terms and had nothing to do with Buddhism, which was confirmed by publications in the journal Buddhism in Russia, refuting Asahara's connection with Buddhism. In December 2015, the Dalai Lama XIV expressed the need to end dialogue with the Islamic State terrorist group, emphasizing the importance of listening, understanding and respect as the only way to resolve the conflict. But there was an incident in His Holiness's biography that caused a worldwide resonance. The incident occurred on February 28. The Dalai Lama attended a ceremony dedicated to the graduation of about 100 children in the program of the Indian charitable foundation M3 Meters Foundation. During the event, a boy approached the Dalai Lama and asked if he could hug him. In response, the Dalai Lama first told him to kiss him on the cheek, and then kissed the boy on the lips. After that, the spiritual leader stuck out his tongue and said to the boy, "Suck my tongue," and they touched tongues. His Holiness wishes to apologize to the boy and his family, as well as his many friends around the world, for the damage his words may have caused. His Holiness often teases people he meets in an innocent and playful manner, even in public and in front of cameras. He regrets the incident. A message on the Dalai Lama's official account said, "The incident was captured on video, and the video began to spread on the internet." According to the BBC, many users called the Dalai Lama's behavior inappropriate and disturbing. Others, at the same time, noted that sticking out the tongue can be one of the forms of greeting in Tibet. On March 14, 2011, the Dalai Lama appealed to the Tibetan parliament to relieve him of his political duties, referring to the current constitution of Tibetans in exile. He announced his intention to relinquish secular power, following the example of the first Dalai Lamas, and hand over control to democratically elected leaders, while his administration, Gaiden Phodrang, would deal only with official affairs. On May 29, 2011, the Dalai Lama approved the transfer of his political functions to an elected representative, ending the age-old practice when the Dalai Lamas played the role of the dominant spiritual and secular rulers of Tibet. In 1969, the Dalai Lama announced that the decision to continue the tradition of the Dalai Lama's incarnation should be made by Tibetans and the peoples of the Himalayan region. To prevent political manipulation of this process, on September 24, 2011, detailed instructions were issued on choosing the next Dalai Lama, eliminating any ambiguities. The Dalai Lama said that in about 90 years, he will gather a council with leading lamas and followers of Tibetan Buddhism to decide on the future of the Dalai Lama Institute. If necessary, the selection of the 15th Dalai Lama, the Gaiden Phodrang Foundation will undertake the search, consulting with spiritual leaders and Dharma advocates. The Dalai Lama promised to leave clear instructions on this process and stressed that any politically motivated elections, especially in China, would be illegitimate. And now let's talk about the work of the Dalai Lama. His influence on culture is reflected in his words, which inspire love and self-knowledge as a path to inner peace and happiness in interaction with the world. His teachings emphasize the importance of forgiveness and inner harmony. We have compiled a selection of His Holiness's most popular quotes. Silence is sometimes the best answer to questions. When you face difficulties with optimism and hope, you avoid even greater difficulties. We will never establish harmony with the world around us until we come to terms with ourselves. We didn't become who we are in one day, and our habits won't change overnight. Cruelty always breeds cruelty and very rarely helps solve problems. Sometimes words that we reject as simple and naive turn out to be the best advice. Be kind whenever possible. And this is always possible. It's not always what you want, you really need. Be ready to change your goals, but never change your values. Respect yourself, respect others, and take responsibility for your actions. We present to you the outstanding books of the Dalai Lama, which, despite the past years, remain relevant and reflect modernity. We hope that these works will inspire you. His latest work, Buddhist Practice, is especially popular. The Path to a Life Full of Meaning. The books are arranged in chronological order for the convenience of new readers. Among his many works, Open Heart and The Art of Being Happy stand out, which are literary masterpieces and are republished in different countries. These books are not only popular, but also reflect the evolution of the author's own thought. Buddhist Practice, The Path to a Life Full of Meaning, and Open Heart, The Art of Being Happy. A Guide to Life, the Path of a True Leader, Kindness, Clarity and Insight. Fundamentals of Tibetan Buddhism. Imagine that. Conversations about money, politics and life in general. 365 meditations for every day. How to be compassionate. The best Tibetan principles of creating peace in the soul and happiness in the world. The revolution of compassion. A call to the people of the future. The Dalai Lama XIV left a noticeable mark on literature and art. Heinrich Harrer shared the story of his communication with him in 7 years in Tibet, a book translated into many languages and filmed with Brad Pitt. The film Kundun by Martin Scorsese, released in the same year, was nominated for an Oscar. The band Rammstein included a song about the Dalai Lama in the album Reese, and the Spanish band Mecano highlighted the Tibetan-Chinese conflict in their song. David Michie created a fictional story about the Dalai Lama's kitten, and Latvian director Ansis Epnes dedicated a film to him. Even in the TV series Kidding, the Dalai Lama appears as a character advising the main character to get married and start a family. In this video, we learned about the life path and philosophy of the Dalai Lama XIV, the spiritual leader of Tibetan Buddhism. His teachings on compassion, non-violence, and the search for inner harmony inspire people all over the world. Despite the hardships that have befallen the Tibetan people, the Dalai Lama continues to carry his message of peace and calls for dialogue and mutual understanding between all people. If you liked this video, please leave a comment, like and subscribe to our channel so as not to miss new interesting videos.